Hey everybody, this is Standing for Truth. We have hosted a ton of debates and discussions here on the Standing for Truth channel, as well as our debate channel, Christian Debate Consortium, hosted by Praise I Am That I Am. Now, two debates that come to mind as particularly very engaging, a lot of fun, and I would say would be must-watch debates, of course. That would be Dr. Ken Hovind's debates with Adam Heap. I really enjoyed having both Dr. Ken Hovind and Adam Heap on my channel to debate, first off, the topic of common design versus common ancestry, and the second debate was Noah's flood and Noah's Ark. Now, I hope you enjoy this video. It's just the discussion portions from those two debates. If you want to watch the full debates, I'll have the links in the description box. Also, we plan on having many more great debates and discussions in the future, as well as putting out numerous videos debunking evolutionism and promoting creation, of course. So if you are enjoying the work that we are doing here on Standing for Truth, then please not only hit that subscribe button, but click the link below and donate if you'd like to. We would really appreciate the support. Anyways, guys, without further ado, enjoy the video.
Adam, tell me about the Mini. Did it do it to itself?
Tell you about, sorry, I didn't hear that.
The Mini, did the Mini make these adaptations by itself?
Oh, I think you misunderstood my point with the Minis. When I said it had adapted to the British lifestyle, it's probably the wrong use of words. What I meant is it's maintained, because you hear a lot of creationists say that various animals have been around for a long time, whereas some seem quite recent. My point with that is the Mini from the 50s and 60s is still around in its current form. My best friend has one in its current form. That was the point I was getting across.
I'm so sorry to jump in here. Adam, did you want to, I think you were still sharing screen from your slides. Did you want to put just your main logo on? And
I was going to use I was going to go over a couple of things in the slides, if that's all right.
Okay. Just for the discussion period. Yeah, if you want to go through a few things, but we're just trying to keep it a free-flowing kind of organic dialogue. Yeah. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. But that was my point in that one, Ken. Sorry if I didn't make that clear enough.
No, I think it was what's called a Freudian slip. It was perfectly clear. The Mini was designed, and I agree. I think, and the fact that they didn't have to improve it much proves that the first guy did it pretty good. And I think the fact that the original dogs are still producing dogs 6,000 is evidence of a really good initial design. You have any examples of any animal ever producing something other than its kind?
Kind. Forgive me, I don't really understand what you mean by kind.
Well, if the Bible says if they're able to reproduce, at least initially, they were the same kind. They might have diversified now to where they can no longer reproduce like Alaska rabbits and Florida rabbits. But I think most 5-year-olds could tell you that a rabbit is not the same kind as a watermelon.
So your definition of kind is something that can reproduce, but they might not be able to reproduce down the line.
Well, they initially could reproduce, and there may be diversities that have happened over the years. They may have adapted to an environment that has caused them to no longer be able to reproduce, like the ring species. They take the salamanders and go around, the central part of California, and the extremes can no longer mate. But they're obviously still a salamander. A 5-year-old will tell you that. It's a salamander. Do you have any examples of any animal ever producing something that any honest person would consider a different kind? What is your best example of any plant or animal producing offspring that are fundamentally different kinds of creatures?
Well, if you look at ancient snakes, I've got a picture of I believe it's Najash, or that might be Problematicus. But there's a picture of an ancient snake, and you've got fossils where you see that it's got leg bones. It's also got the skull of a snake. Snakes are very distinctive skulls. Now, you don't get snakes with legs like that today, not at all. How would you explain that in your point of view?
Well, I think in an honest court of law, somebody could point out, Your Honor, he doesn't know that this fossil he's showing had any children at all. You certainly don't know it had children that were different. And why are you thinking an animal long ago and far away that you found in the dirt can do something no animal today can do? No animal today can produce anything other than its kind. So this might be an example of extinction. There may have been a snake that had some type of limbs like that, and it's now extinct. You don't know that this is intermediate between anything. You don't know it had any kids at all. You don't know it had any kids that lived, and you don't know it had any kids that reproduced, that lived, that reproduced. And if this one is indeed an intermediary, who did it marry? Don't you have to have two at the same time in the same place of the opposite sex? You got a whole long list of problems, Adam. You're assuming, you're believing SpongeBob style that this is somehow an intermediate because it has little legs, appears to be legs. I don't know what it is. Is it a forgery? Certainly many fossils have been forgeries to try to prove the evolution theory. Study the history of that. Is it an extinct species? You don't know that this is the ancestor of anybody. You couldn't prove that in an honest court of law, at least.
I'm a little confused. You said you don't know if it had kids. Is that what you said about the Problematicus of the picture I just showed?
Well, if you find any fossil anywhere, really all you could prove is it died. How could you prove that one had any children that lived? Tell me how you would prove such a thing.
Well, you wouldn't need to prove that specific one. You'd accept that if there's a fossil of a certain animal, that there was a population of that animal?
Well, would you agree that in a court of law, they would say, objection, Your Honor, he doesn't know that? If there's a population of animals and one evolves a special trait, do they all evolve this special trait at the same time? There are billions of cows or millions of cows in the world. If they were going to try to evolve a trait, do all of them have to get it at the same time?
So you're saying, sorry, carry on.
Does one of them get this new special trait and the rest have to die off? This is Adolf Hitler 101. Let's get the superior race and kill off the rest to speed up the process. Evolution, whether you realize it or not, is based upon death being the hero. If this is indeed a superior snake, why are there still snakes today with no legs?
Well, it wasn't a superior snake. As I mentioned with the skinks, the whole reason they're losing their legs is because they're burrowing. What I don't understand, going back, is you said that it wouldn't stand up in a court of law to say that there must have been more than one of these animals alive at one time. Because this animal is there, it's obvious that there's a population of animals like this. That's without exception at all throughout the animal kingdom. I don't understand how that wouldn't stand up in a court of law to say that there were more than just one of a certain animal.
You couldn't prove any such thing. If your evolution theory is true, your whole theory relies on one of them getting a special trait, either by mutations or something, and that trait getting passed on to the next generation.
So you're saying that
over the population of snakes or whatever it is, or skinks or whatever. So your whole theory relies on there being one of them getting this trait and then passing that on to others. Evolution doesn't happen in the present. Science is things we can observe, study, and test and demonstrate. We can observe snakes having baby snakes and skink having baby skinks. We cannot observe any animal having a trait that is new, adds a new feature that is passed on. Nobody's ever seen this. It only happens long ago and far away in fairy tale land. Evolution is a fairy tale for grown-ups. That's all it is.
How about the spitting cobras example that I showed you then, which is numerous times in the cobra lineage, the spitting ability evolving separately because they're not the same spitting ability, that they operate slightly differently?
Why do you say the spitting ability evolved? Why can't you say they were designed to have different design? There are different types of creatures that fly. There are insects that fly. There are birds that fly. There are mammals that fly. There are fish that fly. Why can't we say the same designer decided, hey, I'm going to give each one of these ability to fly? There are no cows that fly, no giraffes that fly, no people that fly. If we're the highest evolved creature with the highest IQ on the planet, why don't we? I'd like to be able to fly, save a lot of time to get places quicker. I think it'd be pretty cool. So if there are snakes, you say, you use the word, I'm sure deliberately, they evolved the ability. You don't know that. They might have been created with that ability. And for the creator to make 5 different types of animals that can fly, and for him to make 3 different types of snakes that can spit, I don't see a problem with that. I think you'll find some of I bet Honda makes cars with the steering wheel on the right side to drive in Europe, in England. And they make some with the steering wheel on the left side to drive in America. You guys do it wrong, by the way. But
well, we could disagree about that in a different debate if you'd like. Why?
That's design, not common ancestor.
Well, let's look at spitting specifically then. Say you make your Honda Jazzes and somebody invents the sat-nav. Everyone loves the sat-nav. It's a great little invention and it's really helpful. Why would God give 3 types of Honda Jazz the sat-nav and not give it to any of the other Honda Jazzes, even though he's got infinite resources, infinite whatever? Why doesn't he give it to all of them? this advantageous ability. And why does he make it these specific ones?
I guess I don't know what a Satna is. What are you talking about?
Oh, sat-nav, satellite navigation. You little.
Oh, satellite navigation, sat-nav. Okay. Why did Honda give it to some and not to others? Well, probably it would cost something to put that in the vehicle. Well, even if the cost is minimal, if it costs $50 to add that to a car, they may make.
I said without cost. I said without cost because God wouldn't have those limitations.
Sure. If you're arguing again from poor design as evidence for no design, which is ludicrous. Take the Porsche that had a poor design. Okay, it doesn't mean there's no design. I don't know why some of them put that in them, some don't. That's maybe you don't need it in some countries. There probably is no place to navigate with by satellite in some parts of the world. Not available there. But again, that would be an argument from ignorance rather than argument for evidence for no designer at all. I think the fact that Honda puts this, navigation systems in some of their cars, that's pretty. The navigation system itself is phenomenally complex. Could not possibly happen by an explosion in an electronics factory. And the Honda's not adding this to itself. God can design anything he wants any way he wants. And we are looking at people today and animals today that are a copy off a copy off a copy off a copy off a copy of the original. It's amazing we can still sit and think and talk. So I think the fact that we're able to move at all is evidence of an incredible first generation copy of Adam. And we have degraded since then. Average person now has 3,500 defective genes, just like my old van out here with 316,000 miles. Well, it ain't what it used to be when it was brand new, but hey, it still works. It's not too bad. And so for the designer to make an original creation with a gene code that can be passed on hundreds, if not thousands of generations and still be working at all. Tell you what, get a computer code, any code, get Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint, make a copy of it onto a disk. Then make a copy of the copy. Then make a copy of the copy of the copy. Do that for 500 generations and tell me if it'll still run. It won't. It'll corrupt. The fact that we're having this conversation at all, even if we have a few genetic flaws inherited over the years, is evidence of a common designer, not a common ancestor.
So if we can take a closer look at this, where would you, I mean, obviously you're saying that various different types of cobra were created, as it were. Where would those created ones be on this this table here, this diagram? Because you've got the spitting groups up here, with the most basal group being Naya Atra. Would it be around there where it says 95? Those are essentially, well, for want of a better word, probabilities of the relationship. This was a phylogenetic study which showed the relatedness between these cobras. Do you doubt that, by the way? Do you doubt this study, that all these cobras were related?
I'm curious why you have lines on your paper at all. You don't know, no animal today, no cobra today produces anything but a cobra. You don't know that they're connected in any way with these lines. See, all these lines is back in what's called fairy tale land, long ago and far away. No cobra today produces anything other than a cobra. None. Zero. Just because somebody drew lines on paper, that's not science. Even if they have genetic similarities, that's not proof of a common ancestor. The Honda Prelude and the my Chevy van have 5 lug nuts. Okay, maybe the Honda's got 4. I don't know. But it doesn't prove they both came from a skateboard. It proves that's a design that works. It's a common theme. When Ford first started making cars, people said, wow, this is pretty cool. Let's put an engine in here that'll run off gasoline or diesel fuel. Those are the 2 basic types of cars. It's a theme people have run with and tweaked and improved over the last 150 years and 130 years. And have made some great improvements. I'm glad I don't drive a Model T that you got to crank up in the morning and have hard tires that are going to break when they get cold and hit the bumps. I'm glad you did.
The difference between cars and cobras is you can't do a phylogenetic tree for cars like this. This was done in a laboratory under pretty strict conditions using 5 different genes, and they got this tree out of it. It's pretty in depth. It's pretty solid. A couple of species might be interchangeable here or there, but this shows the relatedness. It shows that these animals are all related and by what degree they're related. At the very bottom you've got some vipers, the very 4 bottom ones, and you can see that they're very distantly related. They're an out group, whereas all these cobras are pretty clearly related. And we use these same techniques by using these genes to test animals all across the animal kingdom. And we get very similar results. I mean, look at the seals. They're a type of canid. How do we know that? Well, we've tested them genetically. We've also looked at morphological features. Why is it that morphology and genetics both produce almost exactly the same result each time? And why do we get it to such accuracy as well? If they were created, then why is this picture here not for? You say that these cobras were made separately. I don't know. You haven't told me which ones were made separate to the others. I'd like to know that, by the way. But it's quite obvious from this graph that if they are all related, then spitting has evolved independently 3 times. I don't know how you explain that.
Well, you are assuming spitting evolved at all. And to say it evolved,
technically did.
No, it did not. They were created to do what they do. Just the spitting ability is very complex. It involves some type of salivary gland. It involves some type of muscles to eject the spittle out. It's a very complex mechanism. Just spitting is a complex mechanism. And you said this shows relationship. Adam, I don't know who taught you that, but get your money back. It doesn't show any such thing. It shows somebody can draw lines on paper and connect them. That's all it shows.
Are you saying that somebody just drew those lines on the paper?
I'm saying you don't know any of those animals are related to any other animals. You don't know, because today, none of them produce anything other than their kind. Why is it going backwards? They could. Like if we are really related to the whale through a common ancestor like an amoeba, at some point, somewhere way back long ago, the amoeba was able to produce something that was non-amoeba. And you've got all these snakes drawn back to a common ancestor. This is nothing but lines on paper.
I'm very confused that you say that these are lines on paper. I wonder why you say that.
Because I can see them where I'm sitting there, lines, well, maybe lines on a computer. You don't know that any of those snakes are related to any of those other snakes.
I do.
In an honest court of law, all you could prove is spitting cobras have babies that turn out to be spitting cobras. Now, some may lose the ability to spit. Oh, okay. Well, again, that's a losing, not gaining. But you don't know that any of those cobra varieties are related to any others. It could be. Is the Honda Prelude related to the Honda Accord? Or are they both coming from the designer?
Can you tell me how you think that these are just lines on paper?
Today, pick any one of those snakes on that chart, any one of them. When they have babies, what will they be? Will they be straight line to the right, or will they jump to a new category?
It might divulge into 2, or diverge into 2, sorry.
Well, you have, I don't know, I want to count them. Say you've got 30 different snakes there. Could there sometime in the future be 40 different snakes because they've diversified? Yeah. Possibly. That's creating a new category that somebody decided to put it in a new category. Maybe this snake has, different features, different color scales on his eyes or something. But you don't know going backwards in the past that these were related. See, science deals with things we can observe, study, and test. This is not science at all. This is lines on paper. This is imagination. This is SpongeBob. This is fairy tale.
Do you know the process of how these are made?
None of them can be proven in a court of law. You don't know that they're related because they have similar chromosome. Microsoft Word and Microsoft PowerPoint share thousands of identical lines of code. Identical.
So do you know the process by how these phylogenetic trees are created?
Yes, I know the process by which they put the lines on paper and what they try to look for.
Are you saying this is fraudulent?
Similarities between any number of things and draw lines on paper.
Are you saying this is fraudulent?
What's that?
Are you saying this is fraudulent?
No, I'm saying it's imagination. They don't know. Even if it's true, it's not science. You can't prove it. That's just lines on paper. You don't know that.
This is probably the worst time to tell you. This is my paper. I made this phylogenetic tree. I did this study. I can tell you for a fact that this is not simply lines of paper. This took a year of research, study, and analysis of DNA. This isn't me just drawing lines on paper. I'm actually quite offended that you've just... That sounds like you're accusing me of fraud.
Well, do you have a delete key? I would delete all those lines. If it's interesting that you've discovered a lot of different varieties of cobras, that's good research. But it doesn't prove they're related to anything. You can't prove any of those lines belong there. Show me
I can show you all the PCR amplification pictures. I can show you all the work that I've done.
Well, the red category, I don't know, I can't read it from here, but the ones that have the red line in front of them, you think they're ultimately related to the ones that have the yellow lines in front of them.
Yeah.
Do any of the snakes that have the yellow lines, and I can't read the names from here, do any of them ever produce anything other than the same kind of snake?
Well, would you consider a species a different kind?
I think you started with the assumption evolution has happened. Now let's look for the evidence. Why don't you start with the assumption these animals were created? Let's see which ideas the same creator used in all these different animals. Maybe he used a similar idea. Maybe the Porsche now finally puts a cup holder in their cars. I don't know.
But okay, so say we take that example, and we make these phylogenetic trees of all these animals. They all join like this. At what point do we cut it off and say, right, actually, no, those ones aren't related phylogenetically. We have to get rid of those lines because we think that that's where it starts. Where do we put that line?
I would go to the left of each one of the names and draw a line straight down and say everything to the left of this line is imagination, unprovable. Everything to the right of the line is probably science, observable. The cobra is going to produce baby cobras. We don't know that this is related to anything else. And I'm sorry you spent a year on this. A lot of people have done these kind of charts. I mean, you're not the first. Thousands of people have made charts like this. But it is indeed, Adam, nothing but lines on paper. This is not science. This is
I went through the arduous process of all these species that you see on here. I had scale and blood samples for. And I went through the process of extracting or cutting tiny bits of these scales or using tiny bits of these blood samples and mixing them with buffer chemicals, these chemicals that are used in amplification, putting them through a PCR analysis, which uses electromagnetics to move them up. I could show you the pictures. I could show you the pictures of the unsuccessful ones that they didn't amplify. And I got them analyzed. I cut... You get these big, massive maps on Mega 5 where you have all these DNA sequences, all the A, C, T, G, and they line up. And you see where they line up, and you can start to see, right, that one looks like it's a little less similar. And then you make these phylogenetic trees out of that, which is parsimonious. And this tree was made out of 5 different genes, and they all came to this phylogenetic tree. And you can see how likely the majority of these relationships are. I don't see how you can see that that's just lines on paper that I apparently have just made up. I think that's you accusing me of fraud.
Well, I don't know if you did fraudulent or not. Maybe it's just misinformed. Maybe it's just you're.
I took these from scales. I went all the way from the process of having just scales and blood samples, and I made this tree with them.
Did you take the scales from these snakes and analyze the DNA? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes.
Did you break a scale off the snake and analyze the chromosomes or the DNA? Is that how you made this chart? I think I lost him. Adam, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Okay. So if I think I could analyze Microsoft PowerPoint and Microsoft Word and find they have 98% lines that are similar. Okay. That doesn't prove they both came from Morse code. It proves somebody wrote those codes. The same designer wrote the code, and he probably reused some of the same information for snake eyes that are used in monkey eyes or human eyes, because we have 2 eyes, binocular vision, and eyes are complicated. So the same designer used the same pattern over and over because it works. It works great to live in this world. Just like most of the Hondas have 4 tires on them that are round and they're soft and they bounce over bumps. They probably all have a suspension system. That's not proof of a common ancestor. It's proof of a common designer. The purpose of this debate was to demonstrate, does the evidence show common design or common designer or common ancestry? This is lines on paper, Adam. I'm sorry you wasted your time and probably a lot of trees somebody cut down to make the paper you printed it on. But they are just simply lines on paper. You don't know that those are related to anything because they have similar DNA or similar gene code.
Well, in that case, you're free to contact my university where I did this project and say that I simply just drawn lines on paper and see if you can get my degree revoked. You mentioned earlier dogs produce only dogs. So what species of dogs do you include in that?
Well, I don't know. I would guess that dog, wolf, coyote are probably related to a common ancestor, and maybe even wolf might have come from the same kind. I would just be taking a guess, but I would guess there were 8,000 original created kinds of animals.
Mm-hmm.
Today there are 339 recognized breeds of dogs by the American Kennel Association. And counting all the other varieties in the world, there may be as many as 500 varieties that anybody 5 and over would put in the dog category. That does not prove, the fact that we have these 500 varieties of dogs does not prove dogs are related to watermelons, which is what your religion teaches.
You mentioned when we were looking at my phylogenetic tree that you cut the lines off before the species. So you don't think that species, you included wolves, coyotes, your domestic dogs in what you just said. Was there ever a point where a coyote was not a coyote?
I don't think there's ever a point where a coyote would not be in the dog family. And I don't know that our current classifications, like lineage, kingdom, phylum, family, King Philip came over for Girl Scouts, class, order, family, genus, species. I'm not sure that our classification system matches God's original design in any features. But if I had to guess, I would put it somewhere around the family level.
But was a coyote ever a non-coyote?
Probably the dog kind diversified, where the coyote is more specialized and recognizable as a coyote, but anybody would still put it in the dog category. So
it wasn't always a coyote?
Well, is a mini in the car category or the motorcycle category? Car. Okay. Now, is the fact that some creationists cannot always tell you exactly where the kind border is does not prove it didn't happen, and it sure doesn't prove watermelons and dogs are related. Do you believe watermelons and coyotes are related? Adam, if you were to draw lines on paper like you did for this one, with all the animals and all the plants in the world, would they all go back to one common ancestor? Would you have a line on paper connecting a watermelon and a dog?
Well, if you look at phylogenetic studies, everything is related to some degree, and it always seems to match up with morphology. Eventually, very long ago, you'd have the common ancestor of your dogs and your watermelon plants. Yes.
So, okay, just so the audience understands, you believe dogs are related to watermelons if you go back far enough in time. I would like to point out for the court, Your Honor, first of all, we cannot go back in time. Secondly, watermelons always produce watermelons, always produce dogs. There are no examples, none, that can be used as evidence to say anything other than that. So what you've just demonstrated is your religion. You believe very strongly. You believe dogs are related, but that is not science. It's not even common sense. But you would draw lines on paper connecting a dog and a watermelon. I don't trust your lines on paper connecting the snakes either. Yes, you need to get your money back for your degree.
You said dogs only produce dogs. I'd like to compare that to, say if we, hypothetically, we went back to the times of where you've got your Sarcopterygians. I'm sure you're familiar with Sarcopterygians. And you said to me, okay, there's a Sarcopterygian. A Sarcopterygian only ever produces a Sarcopterygian. And I'd say, yeah, you're right. Pretty fair. Zoom back to modern times, and we've got Sarcopterygians that are humans, giraffes, monkeys, and yet they're still Sarcopterygians. Let's zoom forward a few million years or so, and you've said dogs only produce dogs, and then you've got this subset of dogs that are vastly different. You've got this set of dogs that are vastly different. It's the same thing. It's like saying Sarcopterygians will only ever produce Sarcopterygians. Yes, that's true, and they have, but they've got human Sarcopterygians. You got giraffes, monkeys, all your vertebrates. It's nonsense.
Yeah, I agree. What you just said is nonsense. We can't zoom back or zoom forward, and we don't ever observe this, and you don't know that any animal has produced something other than its kind. I would say if we could go back in time to the creation, we would see animals walking around that everybody would recognize. That's the dog kind. Now, it might have produced a variety of dogs with great diversity, from the Chihuahua to the Great Dane. A, they're still dog. B, most of them would not survive in the wild. Most of them, you have to babysit them to keep them alive. Most of the farmers have spent thousands of years developing crops or animals that are specialized to their particular location. There are plants that grow in drier climate and plants that grow in wetter climate. You can get tomatoes for dry climate and tomatoes for wet climate. You can get tomatoes for high elevation, tomatoes for low elevation. They're still tomato, and they're unlikely to survive in the wild. They would revert back to the native original tomato, but they would never change to something non-tomato. You imagine, SpongeBob style, that the dog and the watermelon are related. I feel sorry for you that they taught you that in school, but it's not true. Adam, God created the kinds. God is going to be the judge one day, and you're not going to be able to stand before him and say, well, I looked at the evidence and it convinced me that watermelons and dogs are related. They're going to laugh at you Judgment Day, Adam. You might want to get ready for that.
Gentlemen, we have just over 1 minute left, about 1 minute and 10 seconds.
So I was going to finish with this one here. The blind snakes I'd like to leave you with. It's effectively blind, but it still has the eyes of a snake that's been covered over by an opaque scale. It's got vestigial pelvic structures. It's got shared derived characteristics, so it's got things that other snakes don't have. So it's a blind snake with eyes of a snake that have diminished over time, but it has features that other snakes don't have. So where does this fit in?
Well, again, you're giving examples of losing something. That's not gaining something.
But it is gaining things. It's got different structures to other snakes.
It's not going to turn an amoeba to a whale. You got it all backwards, Adam. Better think about it.
Our next phase will be approximately about 25 or 30 minutes, just free-flowing dialogue. Hopefully I don't have to step in. Your last debate, guys, was actually very respectful, very fun to listen to, very engaging. So I'll leave it up to you guys and start the timer on whoever's first word, whoever wants to start.
Adam, go ahead.
Cheers, Kent. Interesting opening from yourself. If I could compare, if I was to say I had a carrot in the kitchen, and then one day I came home and the carrot was missing. There's the fact. The carrot has gone missing. I could throw out a what-if scenario. I could say the ghost of King Henry VIII came riding in on his horse and took the carrot. Well, it explains it because the carrot is no longer here. And ghost must exist. King Henry VIII existed. So it must be true. That's essentially what I'm hearing here. You're saying stuff and just applying your story to it, but giving no actual evidence to support the claims. One of the things that that was just a response to that. One of the things I want to do, I've got a list of questions here that stray a bit away from the geology. I don't know much about the geology. So if I could go over some of these questions that I've written, I'd love to do that, unless you wanted to continue with the stuff that you started with.
Well, as far as your Henry VIII stealing the carrot story, I think you could probably list every person on the earth instead of Henry VIII. It could be anybody. But I think that'd be a poor analogy. I did give lots of evidence. Okay, it is a fact. Fossilized clams are found all over the world, including the top of Mount Everest, and they're in the closed position. This is a fact. I don't think anybody argues with that. The flood story is a reasonable explanation for that. There are features like Grand Canyon here in America, where the top of the canyon is 4,000 feet higher than where the river starts cutting. The river starts cutting the canyon at Page, Arizona, and you can Google it. It's got an elevation of 2,800 feet above sea level. Well, the top of the canyon is 8,000 feet above sea level. Rivers don't flow uphill. Grand Canyon is a washed out spillway from a giant lake that drained. Go ahead.
What I mean by evidence is a collection of facts that point only to one specific explanation. That's what I meant by the King Henry VIII thing. It explains it, but there's no actual evidence to support that explanation. It's the same with yours. I mean, with the clams, there's all sorts of explanations for why that happened. Why is it your flood specifically?
Well, okay, I would like to hear your other explanations for the clam, but before we get there, keep in mind, we are not demanding that our explanation be taught in the schools at taxpayer expense. The evolutionists are demanding that we all pay to teach their explanation at taxpayer expense. I don't think there's any evidence at all that any animal has ever produced any other kind of animal. There is no scientific evidence that a dog ever made a non-dog or came from a non-dog. But yet all of us are being forced to pay for that religion to be taught in the schools. If we were all forced to pay, Henry VIII came and stole your carrot, I think everybody would object.
Should we pay to teach gravity in schools?
Your religion.
Should we teach gravity in schools?
Say, I didn't understand that. What now?
Should we teach the theory of gravity in schools? Can you hear me okay?
Well, yeah, there's plenty of evidence for gravity. I can show it. I can demonstrate it. We can measure it. 9.8 meters per second, 32 feet per second. I think we can demonstrate it. Can you demonstrate? Can you give me an explanation? Can you show me any animal producing a different kind of animal? Okay, is
That's
this something we have to believe?
That's a topic for another debate, unfortunately, because we.
Well, my point is, the flood story is a reasonable explanation, but we're not demanding that it be taught at taxpayer expense. So the burden of proof is not on me. You guys want to demand that we all teach your religion of evolution, and I think that's unfair and probably illegal.
But we're not talking about evolution in this debate. We're talking about Noah's flood. Can I ask my questions?
Noah's flood. How did the clams get on top of Mount Everest, Adam? What is your explanation? Petrified in the closed.
I'm here to listen to your explanation and decide whether
I gave you mine
or not.
I gave you mine. The world was flooded, completely flooded. During the end of the flood, the mountains lifted up and the valley sank down, and so the mountains formed in the last part of the flood. Psalm 104 tells us that. That's a reasonable explanation. We have the clams on top of the mountain, and they're closed. And this doesn't happen any place in the world today. In nature, clams die all the time by the millions, but they don't ever petrify in the closed position. It's hard to get animals to find animals petrifying at all anywhere. But petrified fossils are found in the ground by the billions and maybe even trillions. Fossils are found. They're not formed. How many animals died today in the world or yesterday? And none of them fossilized. The buzzards dragged them all over, the coyotes, the ants. And fossils simply don't form. We never see fossils forming. And yet we find them in the ground by the billions. What's your explanation for fossils at all?
My explanation for fossils is that it's a process of I don't usually do fossilization, so that's not my field. But there have been billions of years for this stuff to happen, and it probably still is happening today.
You're sure there have been billions of years for it to happen?
Pretty certain.
Okay. Well, we don't see it happening today at all. So I don't think billions of years is going to help, okay? If I told you if you kiss a frog, it'll turn to a prince, I think we would all agree that's a fairy tale. But it sounds to me like you believe if we wait billions of years, the frog will turn into the prince on its own. I think it's still a fairy tale. It's not true. There's no evidence for that. There's no evidence of any animal.
Can we keep this on Noah's flood, please?
Okay, sure. Noah's flood, the story says, God told Noah, two of each kind are going to come to you, save them on the boat. Afterwards, they got off the ark and spread out, probably from the country of today, Turkey. They could have easily gone everywhere in the world while the crust of the earth was more exposed, just by lowering the oceans a few hundred feet. It connects everything. I mean, the water between Vietnam and Australia, this water is only 30 feet deep. You know, the width of this room. That's the depth of the water generally in here. So lowering the water 100 feet would connect everything. So animals could easily get off the ark in Turkey and over 100 years walk anywhere. So I think Noah's flood is a really reasonable explanation for why we have billions of fossils, for why we have layers and strata to the earth. During the flood, the moon would be pulling the water up, the high tide, and in order to keep that bump full as the earth turns, the water has to rush sideways to keep the bump full at the same speed the earth is turning. Well, here in Lenox, Alabama, 31 degrees north latitude, we're turning nearly 900 miles an hour. Water going sideways at 900 miles an hour would explain why we have gravel that is rounded off. It was in a big rock tumbler. It would explain why we have layers, stratification. Noah's flood is a very reasonable explanation for why we have stratification, for why we have petrified trees in the standing position connecting all these layers. Okay. I'll show you pictures if you like.
Is it right if we move on to my questions? I've been begging. I
thought
gagging to go over these questions.
I thought you wanted Noah's flood. Go ahead. What's your question?
Yeah. So I've got a series of questions. The first one being very simple. How big was the ark?
According to the Bible, it was about 515 feet, 300 cubits. And a cubit is elbow to fingertip. Mine's 20.2 inches. The standard Egyptian cubit is 20.65 inches. Everybody's cubit would be a little different. But according to the Bible, it'd make it about 515 feet long and about 85 feet wide and about 57 or 52 feet high, I believe, in 3 stories, 3 floors to it.
Would you agree that would probably be the largest wooden ship ever built?
At the time, yes, it would be the largest that we know of. Of course, according to the Bible, the people before the flood were living to be 900 years old. You could learn a lot in 900 years. Plus, God told him how to build it. There have been many ships built much bigger than that now. The Queen Mary is nearly twice it. What's that?
Are they all? Is it the largest wooden ship ever built?
There was a wooden ship built about that big. They had trouble sailing it because it had 6 sails, 6 masts, and the wind hit them at different speeds and twisted it, and it kept leaking. Of course, Noah's Ark didn't have any sails or masts. It wasn't designed to go anywhere. There was no place to go. It was only designed to float. So it would be more like probably a barge of some kind, float and land. It's only two. All it had to do is float, protect its cargo, and land. It didn't have to go anywhere. No sailing, subject to stresses of sailing would not be affect Noah's Ark.
Okay. How many animals were on the ark? And considering I picked up some quotes here from the Bible, Genesis 7:2. Of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by 7s, the male and his female, and of beasts that are not clean by 2, the male and his female. Considering later on as well, Noah decided to scrap that idea and just brought 2 of each. Just which is the right one? Is it 7s of some and 2 of others, or is it just 2 all across the board?
Well, you just read it. It says that couldn't be more clear. There were 7 of the clean animals and 2 of each of the unclean. There are 2 theories about the clean. One is he took 7 pairs. The other is he took simply 7 animals, 7 clean, and then after the flood, Noah sacrificed some of them, which of course would wipe out the species if there's only 2. So the Bible there's no fuzziness about what it says. It says 7 of the clean and 2 of the unclean. Now
but then it goes on. It
Go
goes on to say 7:8 of clean beasts and of beasts that are not clean and of fowls, etc., etc. They went in 2 by 2 onto Noah into the ark.
Correct. That's what it says, and that's, I believe, what happened.
You just said it was 7s of the clean. You just said it was 7s of the clean.
Okay. I said there's 2 theories. Some people say it's 7 pairs. Some people say just 7.
These are both in the Bible, and it's contradictory.
It's not contradictory. He brought 7 of the clean.
Of clean beasts, etc., etc. They went in 2 and 2. Chapter 7, verse 8. Of clean beasts, and of beasts that are not clean, and of fowls, and of everything that creepeth upon the earth, there went in 2 and 2 unto Noah into the ark.
Okay, if there are 7, are there at least 2? There were 2 of each kind. There were extras of the clean. I don't think anybody reading that without any prejudice would see a contradiction there. They would say, oh, this is no problem. He brought 2 of every kind of animal and 7 of the clean. That's what it says.
Okay. Let's move on then. All right. The Bible states that 2 of every sort will go onto the ark. What is a sort?
That's a great question. Carolus Linnaeus decided to classify animals, which is what your MS is in, zoology and herpetology. We have a classification system that we've used in the last 400 years based on kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. I don't think God cares about our classification system. He divided the animals up into their sort or kind. That phrase is used 20 times in the first 7 chapters. They would bring forth after their kind or bring forth after their sort. So I think in most cases, a 5-year-old could tell you if 2 animals are the same sort of animal. I think a 5-year-old would know that a dog and a wolf are the same sort or same kind of animal. And I think probably a 3-year-old would know a dog and a mosquito are not the same kind. So I think 99% of the cases, it's a no-brainer. Now, there are some difficult ones, even today in classification. If your degrees in herpetology or in zoology, you would understand. People today argue about which family or which genus a certain animal goes into. There is still a huge amount of argument about speciation. Which species is this, and giving it the proper name. And sometimes they have to bump them around and move them around to a whole new class or a whole new family or genus, maybe not an order. I don't know how far it goes. I would just guess that the Bible term kind or sort is probably somewhere along the line of family, according to our current classification system.
So there's no distinction between the 2?
Between kind and sort?
Yeah.
I don't know of any distinction because the words are used interchangeably in the flood story, especially in Genesis 6 and 7. Kind and sort appear to be the same meaning of the same word.
Okay. So have you got any definition for either of them?
Any definition for what now?
For either of them, sort or kind.
Well, that's what I just got done telling you. I think that, do you have a definition for the word species?
Yeah.
Well,
they produce fertile offspring.
Well, are dog and a wolf different species?
Dogs are wolves. So
Domesticus,
that's a
coyote.
nonsense question.
No, it's not a nonsense. Why are they named? They have a different species name. Canis lupus, Canis domesticus, Canis coyotes. They're different species, but yet they can interbreed. Can you give me an airtight definition of species that never has an exception to it?
That never has an exception to it. Well, that's quite difficult because once you get into like certain bacterias, they don't reproduce in the same way. So you can't really do it across the board because things work with different organisms.
I agree.
But the majority, like your terrestrials and your vertebrates and your invertebrates, it tends to be pretty obvious with some exceptions.
That's exactly, Adam, you're making my point for me. That's exactly correct. It generally tends to be obvious. I think it's obvious to a 4-year-old what the same kind of animal is. I bet if you give me 1,000 pictures of animals, we got a 3-year-old on the campus here. Just turned 3. I'll say, Abby, would you please sort these? Which ones would you say are the same kind? I bet she would get 95% of them. And I bet her 5-year-old brother would get probably 98% of them. So even today, and you know this is true.
So you say that 3- and 4-year-olds can do it. Okay, so if it's that easy, let's have a definition.
It is those that they could originally bring forth after their kind.
How would you decide that? How would you research that?
Today, Alaska rabbits cannot breed with Florida rabbits. They have diversified. They're still rabbit. The Florida rabbits can breed with the Minnesota rabbits, and the Minnesota rabbits can breed with the Alaska rabbits. But the rabbit family has diversified to where some of the branches are no longer interfertile. Mm-hmm. They probably could be induced, in the laboratory or something, but there's enough differences in the cold weather rabbits and the warm weather rabbits that they generally won't bring forth. But so in the original creation, they could all bring forth the same kind. I think a dog and a wolf can bring forth offspring. I think a dog and a mosquito cannot. Neither can a dog and a whale or a dog and a pine tree. So I think in 99% of the cases, it's sort of obvious, like you said, what the same kind of animal is. Now, why would you pick at this straw, strain out this gnat, and swallow a camel? Do you believe mosquitoes and whales are related? You have an MS in zoology. Are mosquitoes and whales related, Adam?
I'm a bit... You haven't actually you've given me examples and they're vague at best, but you haven't actually given me a definition. You say a 3- or 4-year-old can tell what a kind is, and yet you haven't given a definition for it.
I did. I said they could bring forth. Originally, they could bring forth.
That's what species is. There you say originally, but that you've told me that you've given me a vague example of, we think that rabbits are all the same kind, but that's not actually evidence. So you need to have an actual definition that we can work with today to bring results.
Okay. Hold it. I need to have an absolute definition. Adam, I'm not making
I didn't say absolute. I didn't say absolute. I didn't say.
Okay, yeah, you did say absolute. Okay, but I'm not forcing everybody to pay for my theory to be taught. You think we should
No. Don't change it again. Don't do that. I want a definition of sort and kind that we can work with to decide.
I'll tell you again for the 3rd time. Write it down this time. Those that originally could bring forth are the same kind.
Now, how do you test that? A definition has to be something that you can test as well. You can apply things to.
If I was demanding for my theory to be taught in the schools, then I would have.
Don't do that again. Don't do that again. Stick on the topic. Kind of sort definition.
I want you to, Adam, I want you to see the hypocrisy of what you are doing. You think everybody should teach evolution, don't you?
It depends where it's happening. If it's a PE class, I don't think it should be taught there.
Okay. Should all the kids in public school science classes be taught that evolution is true?
I think they should be taught its current scientific knowledge.
It's the current scientific theory, or it's current scientific fact?
Well, there are facts within evolution. A culmination of facts brings about a theory.
I see you're reluctant to answer.
You're trying to move away from the fact that I'm trying to get you to give me definitions that actually work.
I
can see that you're trying to get me away from it and try to turn it back on me. But we're not talking evolution. This is Noah's flood. We're not talking about evolution.
Okay. I'm showing the hypocrisy. I'm not asking everybody demanding everybody pay for mine to be taught, but I'll give you a definition. The Bible says they will bring forth, i.e., have babies, after their kind. Do you know of any exceptions where any animal has ever brought forth something that was not the same kind of animal?
Well, how can I do that if you haven't given me a definition of kind? How can I give you an example of something that's changed kind if you haven't defined kind?
I'll give it to you again. If they can bring forth. Let's look at all the babies in the world today of anything, plants or animals. Are they the same kind as their parent? Do you know of any that would be considered a different kind? What's the best example you know of?
You haven't defined kind, so how can I answer?
Look at the baby, look at the mama. Is this going to come out to be looking and working and functioning the same way as the mama and dad? I think it's the same kind of animal.
Not if the baby's born without legs.
What now? Are there babies born that are not the same kind as the parents?
You just said if it functions the same as the mother. Well, if a baby's born without legs, then it doesn't function the same way as the mother. You haven't defined kinds. You can't ask me to give you an example of kinds, given something that's non-kind, when you haven't given me the definition of kind itself. I've been asking you for the last 10 minutes to give me just one definition, and you've failed to do it.
I've given it to you 6 times. Pay attention, son, or you're going to, pay attention, son, you're going to flunk my class if you don't pay attention. They could originally bring forth after their kind. If they could bring forth. That's the definition. Can they bring forth? Can they produce babies? Can a pine tree and a whale make a baby? Can a pine tree and a mosquito make a baby?
Can a bearded dragon and an iguana? Can a bearded dragon and an iguana?
Iguana?
A bearded dragon and an iguana.
No, that's a good question.
How about a royal python and an anaconda?
I don't think an anaconda and a bearded dragon can make a baby.
What about royal python and a European adder?
No. There are about 60 or 80 different families within the snake category. Maybe it's more, maybe it's 100, but certainly there are not millions. I think all the snakes in the world could probably be put into 100 different kinds.
How do you know that?
I'm just picking a number for sake of the argument here. We could look it up exactly.
What gives you that number? What gives you that number? Why do you settle at 100?
Well, it's reasonable to work with. It's reasonable to work with. Do you think a snake and a elephant can bring forth a baby?
Why are you bringing an elephant into this? We're talking snakes.
I'm trying to get you to see how stupid the evolution theory is. It's retarded. And here we are all paying for this to be taught to everybody, and it's insanely stupid. It is not true. I'm defending the flood story as being reasonable. It is reasonable to believe God made animals to bring forth after their kind. Noah brought them onto the ark after their kind, and today they're still bringing forth after their kind. That is very reasonable. I think I win the debate. That was the purpose of the debate, to defend the Bible story. Show me an example where any animal brought forth something other than its kind.
So you said kind was it brings forth after its original kind. How do you find what the original is?
I've told you 7 times now. Son, I think you flunk. Okay, take the class again. If they can bring forth, they are the same kind. Here's Webster's dictionary. Kind, sort, variety, class, a natural group or division. Did you say, could the animals be naturally divided into division into birds and reptiles? They could be naturally divided. Could they be divided with fish? Can fish be divided away from birds? Can they be naturally divided?
Can I give you an example of have you ever heard of Morganucodon? Which is
I can't understand you. Example of what now?
Morganucodon. It is I
didn't hear you.
It's a reptile. Morganucodon. It might be Morganusodon.
I'm sorry, I did not hear what he said. The computer gone?
The name doesn't really matter. It is a reptile that has fur. It's got the gait of a lizard, and it's got the jaw that's halfway between lizard or reptile and mammal jaw. Is that
you have a mammal? A reptile with fur? Wait a minute, Adam, slow down now. You're a zoologist here. What is the name of the reptile with fur, please?
Morganucodon.
How do you spell that?
Morgan. You know, like the name Morgan.
Okay.
U-C.
U-C?
Odon. So yeah, O-D-O-N.
Morganucodon is a reptile with fur, you're telling me. I've never heard of this. I will look it up. Now, if there are some strange ones like the duck-billed platypus that we don't know where to put them, would you put the duck-billed platypus in the same kind or in the same species as anything else? Is there anything similar to a duck-billed platypus? Or is it
put it in the same species as anything else? Well, no, because it's a species unto itself.
It's a species unto itself. Very good. So we can classify animals. How do we classify animals at all? If evolution is true, there should be a blended variety from the amoeba to the whale with everything in between. Why can we even classify them at all? Noah's flood story is very reasonable to answer that. They came onto the ark after their kind. They went off after their kind. They've been making babies after their kind ever since.
Okay. How do you classify red and green?
Good question.
Take the color spectrum and classify red and green and make it distinguished.
Right. Somebody has to get, all the scientists have to get together and agree this frequency will be called green. If it varies too far from that, we'll have to call it something else. But there's probably a blended infinite number of colors between our 7 colors we've chosen to set as the standard: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. So indigo violet. So I think we have set standards for saying this is red, a certain frequency, but there's 10 million shades of red, and they gradually fade into the other colors. I understand.
Exactly. Gradual fade,
now,
right.
Adam,
we get back onto Noah's flood now, please.
Do we see the same blending between elephants and snakes? Where is the animal that's 96% elephant? Where is the animal 96% elephant?
If possible, I think we've strayed off topic. Could we go back to Noah's flood?
I'm going to stop. I'm just going to.
You don't want to answer that question. You made up the color story about the red and green. I'm asking you, where is the animal that is 96% elephant?
If you can answer that question, Adam.
Well,
I can show you a color that's 96% green.
No, you can't.
I can show you there's a blending between green and red. I don't think you can show me a blending between snakes and elephants. I think you're making it all up. I think it's a stupid theory.
And then I'm just going to step in real quick here. So looks like you've, on your question, Adam, about kinds and related questions to that, looks like we spent a while on that. I've got some things written down from Dr. Hovind's opening presentation. We've got exactly 4 minutes for the discussion portion. Do you have any objections to anything that Dr. Hovind said in regards to the canopy, fossils, the evidence that he gave for a global flood? If we want to spend the last few minutes on those things instead of kind.
I'd like because I've only gone through like 3 of the 20 questions I've had. So if I just get some quick answers to some of the other questions. Okay. So I'm trying to get it back. So I've worked hard on these questions and I've hardly been able to get any of them.
Of course, yep. And take as much time as you need if you want to ask your question and not spend too much time, I guess, arguing on one question. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So, Kent, how long was the vessel at sea for?
The battle at sea? What is that?
Oh, no, the vessel at sea for.
Well, according to the Bible, Noah got in the ark and then a year and 2 weeks later got out of the ark. However, it says in the 7th month, it landed. It took 5 months for the earth to dry out or the water to run away or the crust of the earth to quit shaking around. So Noah was at sea for probably about 6 or 7 months.
Right, okay.
Okay.
Yeah. How did Noah account for lull and roll of the boat? Because I imagine there's probably a lot of turbulence. Water turbulence. You probably got at least a sea state 8 or 9 throughout this whole thing. How do we account for lull and roll of the boat, considering that keels weren't invented until the Vikings?
Well, if you study what they have discovered in Turkey that they're claiming is indeed Noah's Ark, let's see, it's on part 3 of my story. They have found 12 giant stones. They call them drogue stones, D-R-O-G-U-E. The drogue stones apparently were held under the boat hanging by ropes. Let's see, the ark, I don't know where that is. I have to find the slides. If you watch my seminar series, but they found 12 of these rocks. They weigh about 9,000 pounds apiece. They apparently were held over the side of the boat hanging on ropes. Drogue stones they're called. I'll show you pictures. If I had the question earlier, I'd get ready for it. But what would happen if you had rocks hanging around the boat, big rocks hanging on ropes, the wind would automatically turn you perpendicular to the waves. You don't have any roll because you're facing the waves head on. It's called a drogue stone. These have been found. They're in the museums over there in Turkey where they have the Turkish government built a visitor center where they claim Noah's Ark is, what the remnants of it. If you watch my video number, here it is right here. Video number 3, the drogue stones, slide number 148, 148, enter. This is one of the drogue stones here. The Vikings carved crosses on them when they came through there. Not the Vikings, the Crusaders. They said, man, this is from Noah's Ark. These rocks weigh about 9,000 pounds, 4,000 kilograms. The hole in the top is larger in the center than it is at the exits on both sides. Apparently, there was a rope through there with a knot in the middle, so it can't chafe the rope and go back and forth. Ships today in the Sea of Galilee, use drogue stones to hang them over the side of the boat. During stormy weather, drop the rocks down in. It stops the roll. from happening because the rocks create drag, effectively a sea anchor. Here's an example of what it might look like. If it gets really windy, the boat would be automatically turned perpendicular to the waves. You hit them head on. So there is no roll at sea with a boat with drogue stones. Simple solution. I mean, people today can figure this out. Noah was 600 when he built the boat. I'm sure he figured it out, and he did it under the instructions of God. So the answer to your question is there were probably big rocks hanging all over the boat, drogue stones, they're called, and that would prevent, there was no roll.
Okay.
Ships today.
Can I move on to my next question?
Navy, ask the Navy of your country, do they try to always hit the waves nose on? Of course they do, because you don't want the roll. So Noah didn't have to have any steering mechanism at all. The wind is going to cause the waves. Waves are always perpendicular to the wind. And so by having the side of the boat itself catch the wind, it's going to turn it perpendicular. It's going to hit them head on. There will be no such thing as roll on the ark.
Okay. Moving on then. What was the next question? So I've mentioned water turbulence. Obviously, what would the water turbulence be like? What would be the sea state?
I didn't understand that. I speak American, not English. But what was it?
What would have been the sea state? Sea state goes 1 through 10. 1 is like the water is like a mirror. 10 is the waves are 50 feet high.
Well, that even to this day, right now, this moment, it varies from 1 to 10 all over the world. I mean, some places it's a 1, some places it's a 10 right now. So
considering the conditions of Noah's flood, what would the
there's no way to tell. I think Noah was in calm water the whole time and didn't have a problem.
Calm water, despite the fact that all this water has been displaced.
Oh, yeah. There's water when they had the earthquake in Indonesia in 2004, all the landslide underwater made a huge tidal wave that killed 250,000 people. We didn't feel a thing in Pensacola, Florida.
Wait, so you said earlier that the water was jetted so much that debris was flung into space. The entire world was flooded, and you think
right? And within an effective radius of that crack, you would get enormous problems. But see, Noah was outside of the danger zone from all those cracks.
Okay.
Prove I'm wrong.
Right. Ancient Mesopotamia would use what we now call keleks at the time of the supposed Noah's flood, which ships.
You've got 20 seconds, gentlemen. So I guess this will be your last question.
Yeah. Okay. Is it all right to just finish off this question then, despite the time limit?
Of course. Yeah. Ask that question, and we'll allow Dr. Hovind to respond.
Right, okay. So the question overall is what kind of boats would be around during that era? So obviously you've got ancient Mesopotamia, they used keleks, which were ships supported by inflated animal skins. The Egyptians had only just started making boats that were able to enter the oceans, and they were made with bits of wood or papyrus, and they were tied together with rope, and all the holes were filled with reeds. How would you, in the times where this is the top of technology, the absolute top, how would you expect a boat to be at sea for over a year in, you say the seas were calm, but they wouldn't be, turbulent waters, with a wooden ship bigger than the biggest wooden ship ever built? How do you account for that?
Well, first of all, he was at sea for 7 months. I already answered that. Secondly, he was 600 years old. He'd be smart enough to think of this kind of stuff ahead of time. Thirdly, God told him how to build the boat. Fourthly, we can't prove it was in calm water or rough water. You're assuming the worst in every scenario because you don't want to believe the Bible, do you, son? You want to reject God's clear teaching of the word, and I understand that. That's your option. But worse yet, you guys want all of us to pay for that stupidness to be taught in schools. I don't think that's fair. But I think Noah's Ark story is told very clearly and succinctly in the Bible in 3 chapters, Genesis chapter 6, 7, and 8. Jesus claimed to believe it. Millions of people around the world have claimed to believe there was a worldwide flood. 330 flood legends now have been found from cultures around the world that had no connection with each other. There's certainly a lot of history about a worldwide flood. So to answer the specific questions of exactly how tall were the waves when Noah was, sailing 6 months and 3 days after the storm started, I don't know. Doesn't matter. But there are storms going on right now, probably hurricanes right now hitting Thailand or something. They're not affecting us over here. It's a big world. And it's very reasonable for there to be really horrible waves and storms and perfectly calm outside an effective radius of that. That's simple inverse square law.
Have you ever been on
the square inverse of radius.
I think on a flat bottom vessel in Sea State 4.
Oh, I don't know if it was flat bottom or not. Why would you say that?
Because keels weren't invented until the Vikings.
Keels weren't invented. That's in our modern history. That's post-flood. Noah's Ark apparently did have a keel. They found it. Let me show you here.
There weren't any keels known until the Vikings, which were...
Well, that's because they're not studying Noah's Ark. They found the keel up near the mountain, Mount Ararat. This is a volcano. Mudslides and lava flows have pushed the ark down, but it tore the keel off. It was actually full of ballast stones. Noah's Ark had an effective keel because it's still there. Go over and study it in Turkey. You can go see it for yourself. There are ballast stones in it right now, and it's ripped off the bottom of the boat. The boat has slid down 17 miles from 4,000 miles of earthquakes and mud flows. So just because the Vikings finally refigured it out doesn't mean there wasn't one before that. People were 900 before the flood. I think you're stuck with the dreaming assumption that people today are smart and ancient people are stupid. That's starting with the wrong premise. Ancient people were smart. We can't build the pyramids today. We can't lift a 2,000-ton stone up in the wall of Machu Picchu. We have no way of lifting it. They knew something we don't know.